Boom. Okay, today is a day of simply doing some cleanup and color and taking some shots that are pretty well roughed in and getting them to a finished state. So let me see here. I'm not sure what the last shot, I'm looking at my channel to see what was the last. Oh, okay, yeah. So this was the shot I did last, and then so a fair amount's happened in the meantime, which is basically this shot, this shot, this shot, which obviously these are really the same shot. And then this is the one I just finished. So this was a little tricky because, you know, you're using limited animation to convey the idea that, you know, you've got all these organic leaves that are sort of being moved around, and so this is how it wound up looking. Not too bad. Not too bad. I'm pretty satisfied with it. So he's like, monkey. Oh, sorry, I blew the timing. Monkey, there you are. Okay. And then from there, this shot. Let's see. This is actually probably a good one to show off a bit. I'm not going to save that because for reasons I won't explain at the moment. But this shot here is 707. Okay, so let's pull up 707. If I don't want to search for it, you've got the issue that your scenes and your folders, and there's a lot of pings in this folder. So if I know the file name, it's actually faster just to type it in. So it's 707. So it's minus 707 dot ping dot cra. And so what was really interesting about this shot was I did what I would call a breakdown. And this is absolutely something that's going to be happening more often. It is a bit hard to see what I did because I actually had frame numbers written into this drawing, so that what I did essentially was get the staging. I'll kind of sketch into it to show the concept here, but I knew that Mel's arms are going to come down to something like this. Let's just say, just a quick sketch to show. So his arm's going to come down this way. She doesn't do anything. The monkey leaps up here to Luca, holds for a moment, and then scrambles up here. And then in the meantime, Luca's arm comes up. So what I did was I decided let's really sit down, and one of the skills I want to develop, I want to get actually very, very good at, is being able to see not just the progression through time of something, but also the progression through time of multiple layers that are interacting in a certain order. So long story short is, I'll just throw in some numbers here just to give an example of what I did. So let's say this is going to start on frame 12. So I put 12 here. You say he's going to leap. You're basically doing 2 keyframes in 3s. So this is going to be 12. This here will be 15. This will be 18. There's going to be a pause for, let's say, 2 seconds. And again, this is on 3s, but it is still at 24 frames a second. So let's just say, well, actually, let's just say he's going to wait 1 second as an example. I don't remember what the exact timing was, but so we'll add 24 frames to that. So that takes us up to 42. You got 1 keyframe in the middle here, and then he lands here at 48. Typically, with this type of a cartoon, you really don't want things to happen at the same time, really at all, which makes it easier to animate. But so the idea would be that in between this break, let's just go to a different color here to make it easier to see. So that in between this break, his arm would go, let's say starting on 21, it would angle up over, let's say 2 keyframes. Okay, so 24, 27 in the middle. This would be about 30. Okay. And then once this all happens, Mel relaxes over here and his arms drop. So we would say maybe at about 51, this is, let's say from 55 over, let's say it's kind of a slow movement, so let's say over 2 keyframes of movement and then to the landing point. So you got 55, let's say 58, 61, 64, something of that nature. This is the exact timing that I came up with, but what was interesting is by mapping this all out in my mind, I got real clarity about what it is in the shot that never moves, that essentially becomes a static backdrop over which all the animated frames will exist. And by the way, none of which takes into account the timing of the lip sync, which really all happens afterwards, which is essentially Lucas saying, I've been looking for you all day. Okay, well, what was interesting is by doing the breakdown and essentially giving no attention to, actually, let's check this and see if the, yes, actually, okay, very good. That helps. Okay, I've just got basically a keyframe glitch here where this shot really doesn't belong in there. Okay, so this is the actual timing. This is what was really there. And it's a little hard to grok out what's happening because it turns into a bit of a mess if there's too many things happening. But this was how I literally mapped it all out. And then I was able to go through, create the static drawing, create the background, and then, well, okay, wait, let me pause on that. I did not create the background on this shot yet. But, so if we take the background out and the label out, what was cool about it is that the timing pretty much came out perfect. So mapping it out in your head definitely, and then jotting down a breakdown like that, definitely makes it easier to just churn through the scene in very, assembly line fashion. So the shot was on the quick side to do, but yet it's one of the busier shots we've had so far. So when we hit the play button, so I actually cheated a bit by adding some tweens on 1s or 2s here with the monkey, because I'm like, you know what, basically the monkey is the only place where I'm kind of breaking the rule of doing things on 3s, because he's got little quirky, silly things he does, like the wiggle of the tail there at the end, that really doesn't look right if you just put it on 3s. And it's so inexpensive to add tweens on 1s to specific things like that, like doing the tail, adding that little bit of secondary animation takes 10 seconds. I mean, it literally takes no time at all. So, for example, you might go here, and then by putting a lasso around this, you can then hit the maybe the liquefy tool and just drag it around a little bit, and as I say, it very quickly jumps into shape and looks better. In fact, I added, if you notice, at the very end of the whole thing, I added this sort of confused blink on Mel. So this shot still needs color, and I'm not going to save that. Okay, so that's where we're at, is we've got this shot essentially done. This shot needs color, this shot needs color. I believe these all need ink and paint, but all of the animation for those shots is done. Now you'll notice that these are not ping.krita, these are all blends, so these were done in Blender. Right, so let's open up Blender, and we're going to go to 701-A.blend. And good news, it turns out that the ink is done. Okay, so that's good news. That means I can render this shot out, and I'm going to paint it in Krita. It would be insanity to try to paint this in Blender. And then once I'm into Krita, I can add some fine details with my brush if I want to, such as the little details on her hat. But the point here is that, like many anime shots, it's actually a static frame. Now we could add a camera move or something. If you wanted to do this, if you wanted to add a camera move to this, the way I would do it is take this static shot, since nothing moves, just paint the character, and then bring it back into Blender as a background image at full opacity. Okay, and so then all of your color would just show up behind the grease pencil strokes, and at that point you could go ahead and, well, actually, let me strike that. You wouldn't be able to do a camera move. If you wanted to do a camera move, you would have to bring the colored static image in on a plane so that it actually exists in the 3D space, and you would definitely want it to be residing right here in the same space as your grease pencil layer, so they're right together. That way you don't get, if you don't do that, you'll inadvertently get parallax between your outlines and your color. So so they'll be lined up perfectly, and as the camera move happens, they'll get out of sync like that, right? So that's one thing you have to be careful of. So in this case, bottom line is there's more than one way to do it. I would say, based on the storytelling, a camera move makes no sense. She's already in a close-up, and I say she. I know that might be confusing if you haven't been following, but the bottom line is she's in disguise. She's dressed up as a guy. So the most efficient way to deal with that shot would be to just render it all out as an image sequence, and then just do one frame of coloring in Krita. Let's take a look at this shot. This would be B, I believe. Yep, 701B. So let's take a look at that. 701B. Okay, and happily, this one has been inked as well. You get going, you get doing so much you can't remember what you did, right, or how far you got. Okay, so this one's a little bit more complex, but essentially it only requires really 2 keyframes of paint, only because of the way the arm moves. But I believe I wanted the arm to shake, so what you're going to really have is you're going to have all these keyframes, and the hand is not going to just do this, it's actually going to do this. What does that tell me? Well, it tells me that when I render this out, this is actually a good example of a shot that probably should be done entirely in Krita, and then either have the lip sync overlaid, or else bring it back into Blender. Truthfully, it'd be faster just to do it in Krita. So what you're going to do is you're going to render this out actually as just two images. Okay, so now what I'm getting into here is how would you then make this process like efficient? The smartest way to do it actually would be to just have a 2-image sequence. Just bring it into Krita as 2 images, just these 2 images. Paint this one, duplicate the layer, and then add this slight change here, and then go ahead and add this in Krita, and then just overlay the voiceover, the lip sync image sequence over top of that in Krita, and basically again you're done, other than the backgrounds, obviously. So now here what we have is essentially the same shot, but I did do it as a separate shot. And here again, you actually have this going on. Blah, you little rat. Actually calls him a thief. So this one would be interesting to do as a it would be interesting to do it by mapping an image sequence to a plane in Blender and then animating the offsets, as I've shown in recent videos. But the truth is that's a clunky way to do it. It's probably not the smartest way to do it. This one, again, the smartest way to do it would be just take these 2 frames, get them painted in Krita, and then overlay the lip sync, because then I can repeat these 2 frames as much as I want, like that, and So far here as I'm analyzing it, I'm going to say most of this makes the most sense to just do the finishing work in Krita. Shot D, okay, so now this is kind of interesting. Shot D, as you can see, is actually pushed in close to Mel. And he says, that little rat's been a thorn in my side for... Wait, again? How do you know him? Okay, and then she whips around like this and says, how do you know him? Okay, this one was done in Krita, so I want to take a look at it. See what I've got. This is 705, so again, we're just going to just type it in. Dot 705 dot ping dot cra. And they're called ping dot cra because what I've been doing is I actually save this as a ping, and then because it's got layers in it, Krita then invites me to save it at the same time as a Krita file, which is good. So then that's useful because it updates my storyboard image with the most recent version of the shot while at the same time saving it in the same folder as a Krita file that has all my layers intact. Okay, so now this shot is actually not really ready. Oh wait, yes it is. I'm sorry, my bad. Again, forgot about what I did. So, how do you know him? Cool. So there's a bit of work to do. Let's rock and roll. Step 1. Let's go back to the first shot. Sorry, we want to go to the storyboard. This one. Okay, we're in Blender 701A. So now the next thing I want to look at is simply, do I have the folder set up? I'm thinking I don't. But if we look here, here's 701. Okay, and it looks like we've got ink of Mel's body already done, although that may have some issues. And I want to say here, by the way, if you're going to do a pencil test in Blender, and a big reason to do that is because with the grease pencil, it's quite nice to be able to make little edits, for example, to your shot, either with the proportional editing tool, for example, or perhaps with the grease pencil editor. You can really fine-tune your geometry. And because Blender essentially treats grease pencil layers as vectors, there's never any loss of resolution or degradation compared to, say, using the liquify tool in Krita, which does result in some degradation of the image because things get softened when they get manipulated that way. Now the question one must ask oneself is, do we care? And the answer, actually I'm gonna reverse that. This should probably be more of a grab. I'm just doing a little fine tune here. So this is the sort of thing I'm talking about. We're just fine tuning things. Okay. So then the question was, do we care about line degradation? I'm going to say that 99% of the time, it turns out, no, we don't. Because the truth is, you're probably going to want to take your whole shot and add a 1 pixel blur when it's all done anyway, just to soften it up a little bit, because if it's too sharp, it just doesn't look, it just looks too sharp, you know. If you compare it to a screenshot of an actual anime show at full HD, yes, there are newer animes that do have extremely crisp lines, but I'm kind of going for an old school look, and so I'm tending to favor a little bit of blur. Okay, so what's the point? Well, the point is that, therefore, if I take this image, I did not mean to do that. Let's go with, let's hit the, just click anywhere, hit the A key, and go to liquify. And so the kind of thing I'm talking about is like this right here. And if we zoom in really close, I want to correct this. Okay, if you look really close, you'll see that that line now is slightly degraded compared to this line. And the more you use the liquify tool, the more of that degradation you get. And as I said, the truth is it just doesn't matter. It actually looks fine. You don't really see that degradation. And so then the question becomes, do you ink in Blender or do you ink in Krita? My general assessment, or OpenTunes for that matter, my assessment at this point would be, actually, it's better to ink in Krita. And the reason is because it isn't because of getting closed shapes and things like that, because if you zoom in really close here on the grease pencil, you'll see little bits of garbage like this. And actually, it turns out, if you look at this at render size, for the most part, those artifacts, they're so small that they resolve to a single pixel or two when you render it, and so they actually wind up hiding themselves, like this little bit of garbage here. You just don't see it. However, notably, it does result in a little bit more trouble at the paint stage, because what happens is there might be a very slight bit of data in the alpha channel because of those artifacts, so that when you do your fill job in Krita, it doesn't quite fill right to the edge. Okay, so long story short is, if you want predictable ink work as it relates to flowing into the paint work, overall you get less headaches if you do the inking in Krita. And there's certainly nothing wrong with bringing it into OpenTunes and maybe even using the new multi-arc tool, which is a great tool for inking. The main issue I have with that at this point, I haven't sort of come to a decision on whether I'm going to be using that more, but I'm thinking not, for the simple reason that most of the inking I'm doing, I'm wanting to keep a little sketchier quality in it. And obviously using a Bezier curve based inking tool, something like this, or in the case of the arc tool, I don't think, does Krita even have an arc tool? It really doesn't. Freehand path, that would be, okay, so that's kind of interesting. I wonder if that's got like a smoothing option. I tell you the truth, I've never used this, and I would be looking for it to yeah, I'd be looking. Well, let's see. It says optimize. What happens if you optimize this? Okay, well maybe. Yeah. So actually, if you're gonna ink in Krita, I've never done this, but honestly, let's just play with this for a moment. Using the freehand path tool, which you would think of as being a vector layer tool, but it appears to work fine in a paint layer. Let's just confirm that. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. What I just saw, I've never seen before. So apparently the eraser tool is still being used. So in other words, if I use the brush, it's just going to erase. If I use the, what was it called again? Not the dynamic brush tool, the freehand brush tool. Freehand path tool. It erases like this. So it actually is generating a path and then doing the erase operation. Was kind of interesting and useful, I suppose. But my point was that for inking purposes, what this might be useful for going forward is the fact that you can kind of do this, and then it slightly optimizes it. And what's cool about that is it optimizes it after the fact. So why is that important? I'll show you. Actually, this is really kind of an interesting little real-time discovery. If you use the stabilizer or the weighted smoothing to give your ink lines smoothness, what happens is you always have this lag. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? Especially if you're used to it and you're in sort of inking mode and you expect that, then it's fine. It's just not a big deal. If you prefer to keep your lines loose and know that Krita is going to smooth them out for you after the fact, then it might be better to use the freehand tool, and let's just say right here the optimization is at 50% or 0.5. So, and by the way, this I've noticed this with the Bezier curve tool as well, as you generally want to make the size of your brush 1 pixel smaller when you use the so-called vector tools on a paint layer, because what happens is the line comes out slightly thicker. In this case, honestly, you could get away with 2 pixels, but really 3 is about right. So, and it's because of pressure sensitivity, I suppose. You're going to get a little tighter result. You're going to get a little more pressure sensitivity in your line with the brush. You're going to get a little more precision with the freehand path tool. So let's just see what happens if we crank this up to 1. It's probably going to really smooth it out a lot. Let's see what happens. So why is that useful? Well, it means you can take a fairly shaky line, and yeah, it kind of gets resolved pretty nicely to a solid line. So I'm going to kill this and not save it. Let's get back to work here. So, I mean, you know, bottom line is you can do inking with the Blender grease pencil, and I've given that a real fair shake over the last week or so, and my general assessment is I'm loving the Blender grease pencil for pencil tests and kind of working out rough animation, but still seems to, and you know, doing the breakdowns, although I've mainly done that in Krita. So anyway, here's where we're at, and what I would say is, in this case, we want to kind of transition here into rock and roll mode, which means how do we get this particular shot done as quickly as possible? Check something. Okay, right now the OpenGL render is, and we do want full sample on. Whenever I'm outputting from the Blender grease pencil, full sample does a little better job of anti-aliasing, but you want to be in transparent mode. And then in this case, do we want to remove her face? We really don't want to remove her face. We really want to just remove her mouth. And that is not simple to do, so we'll just erase it in Krita. Okay, so that means we go F10 and then F3. So all we're doing is saving this. This is shot 701A. So I want to go back here and go 701A so that Blender creates a folder. And the image that we're saving, and by the way, this is wrong. It's about to save it as a JPEG. Let's change this over here to a ping. That's because right now I've got the overall render settings set for JPEG, just so I can render out a full, you know, animated sequence and have it play back just fine in real time. It's a little more efficient with JPEGs than pings. Now, right now, I'll just call this Tia. I've been calling her Tia for short. Okay, I don't know what the actual resolution of that is. Let me jump over here and check. Okay, full HD, so that's what we wanted. That's perfect. So now we can go in and actually whip this shot out in a hurry. So what we do is we go into folder 701A, and it looks like we have a glitch because it does not appear to me that Blender created the folder. Let's check that one more time. Okay, 701A. That's interesting. Maybe I just need to hit the old refresh button. Yep, that's all it was. Okay, and that's one of the very few deficits of the Faststone image viewer. Now, what I see here, this is kind of informing my process of how I get from Blender back over to Krita. The alpha channel, yeah, here we go. It's because the render settings are set to JPEG. It didn't save the alpha channel, so my bad. That's just a dumb mistake on my part. And now everything's gonna work. Wait, I rendered the wrong thing. Did I? Oh, maybe not. Yep, there we go. So, ping. Don't really need compression. Okay, so now, there we go. So now we can pop it in here, and then all we need to do is immediately erase the mouth. Oh, Krita just blew up, looks like. That hasn't happened in a long time. Let's try that again. I'm hitting the E key, which is set up as a hotkey in the Fastone image viewer to automatically cause whatever image I currently have selected to open up in Krita. Okay, let's try that again. Why that would have... Okay, so the stupid stabilizer's on. I definitely don't want that. Okay, so now this is actually going to be a good study, because we're going to be dealing with Blender ink lines. We're going to find out if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And what we're going to find out is it's both. Just depends. So let's go ahead and grab a... and now, because the paint's going to be on a separate layer, the the ink lines could be made more dense if I wanted to by just doubling this layer. And, you know, so we can kind of be fluid about that. But I will say this, for painting purposes, probably not a bad idea to go ahead and make the lines more dense, just so that the painting process is more likely to catch the edges the way we hope it will. Okay, so now we need a color key. Let's go to our characters, and let's just drag Tia in as a new layer, and immediately just resize this. Really all we need is this right here, which gives us our color scheme. And now we're going to just dive in and see what happens. This could be ugly, folks. So we're going to grab the fill tool. Actually, the first thing we're going to do is get her irises. With details, you tend to want to work out. Whoops, wrong brush. You want to work out from the smaller stuff to the larger stuff. Tends to be a little more reliable. So you can certainly color in behind mode on the same layer, but it does seem that more often than not you wind up regretting it, because there's some stupid reason why you wanted to separate your outlines from your color. Classic example would be you color the whole thing, you get the whole scene done, and then you realize that the ink lines are too dark, and now you don't have a very convenient way to separate your ink from your paint. Not too bad. Not too bad. So obviously we got a little hand painting to do, but that's no big deal. That takes literally 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I lied. It took about 8. But yeah, that's that. The other thing about keeping the paint on a separate layer is that you see the way I chiseled out some of the color of the eye. That's basically simple to do. So here's her cloak. Let's just go back here and boom, boom, boom. This is, see now, this is actually the same color. Let me check a couple other shots just to see, make sure we're not flying too blind here. Okay, yes, actually, yeah, her head covering is really not accommodated in the color key. So let's use this instead for our color key. That's cool. So this one, we can send that one the way of the buffalo. And then really what I'm wanting to do here is just get that color. Yeah. Okay, so let's color it. Whoops. Oh, I don't like when that happens. There we go. The color didn't take for some goofy reason. Okay, so now we're going to get some crazy stuff going on because we got some leaks somewhere. So let's just kind of sort of see what we got going here. Yeah, that whole thing is the same color. Let's see if it colors the whole page. Looks like Krita's really thinking. Yeah. We have a leak. Could be right there. That looks like it might be the source of the leak. So, unfortunately, with paint, I see something right there. All you really need is one little hole, and all of a sudden your job takes twice as long because you got to go in and correct it. So, truth of the matter is, guarding against that is easier in Krita than Blender. Again, therefore, it does seem to be more of a win to do the paint work, or I'm sorry, the ink in Krita. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Okay, that turned out okay. There's definitely a little touch-up required. But, you know, it's one of those deals where you don't really care that it took a little extra work to get it colored because you're really literally only having to color one frame. And then all the work is done insofar as the animation is concerned. Now, in this case, we do want to add the shadows here. Now let's pause for a moment and think about this. Whatever we do here, we're going to want to do this shot second, even though it's third in the sequence. So let's, whoops. Yeah, we're going to want to go from this shot to this shot. Unless, I better check this in Blender. File, I guess we'll save this. I want to look at C to see if the staging changed at all, because I suspect it might have. Yeah, it did. The staging's different, so we can't leverage one shot into the other, so that's okay. That's okay. It's not our favorite situation, but another thing I wanted to check, by the way, is this little bit right here. Nope. Darn it. I really, really, really hate it when you go to sample a color and it doesn't take. It happens shockingly often. Okay, there's your little leak. So yeah, the problem of leaks like this, I had hoped that because of the way Blender resolves the grease pencil lines to pixels when it renders, that this would be, you know, almost like a non-issue, but truth is, it turns out it's definitely an issue. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and now it's going to also save it as a Krita file, bearing in mind that this is getting saved in the 701 A folder. So, boom, let's save that. And now we can go ahead and deal with, let's put her in a group and add a shadow layer. All right. So now probably the way I'm going to want to do this is, let me really think about this for a minute. For the most part, she is backlit. However, she is turning around when she's cursing the monkey. So actually, what we should have going on here, let's just have a broad shadow situation like that. Okay, so the idea is that she's going to catch a little bit of light here, and let's just say I'm not deciding right now if I completely like the way I am doing this, but let's just try. That's not too bad. So yeah, we're definitely going to need another layer of shadowing to clarify what's going on here. But not too bad, not too bad. I'll take that. Boom. Okay, and you can see, by the way, we have a bit of an issue there. Alright, and then we'll add a second shadow layer that's going to be black. Hopefully that'll fill nicely. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and give an extra push to the shadows here, and then I'm just going to basically chisel back. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Chisel back into this a little bit. Okay. This brush is like stupidly large. Let's see. Yeah, actually what I'm going to do, let's cancel that last line. And then what I'm going to do is go right along here. Yep, that worked. So this is all judgment, you know, there's no right answer. I'm going to just go ahead and put a little push there, and then I think, whoa, didn't mean to do that. Need the B key, not the F key. Yeah, that feels pretty good. Yep, now all we need is a background and the lip sync, so cool. And with that, I am going to take a break. As you know, there will be more later.